think not only does it raise real questions about Russia's relationship to the crime itself and what they're afraid of within the creation of an independent tribunal, but also raises real questions about the Security Council and whether it can be counted on to enforce the UN Charter. Barbara? I mean, that question probably at the UN is pretty tough. That's a pretty tough response by her.
Yeah, I don't think we should be surprised that Russia would veto something like this. They are, all in when it comes to supporting the separatists in eastern Ukraine. And I think this is one of those symbolic steps. There have been a number of things that have come to the Security Council, for example, on Syria, that the Russians have also vetoed because of their support for Assad. So they support the separatists. We don't hear much about it anymore, but there's still fighting going on, obviously. And this, the passengers on that plane were unfortunate casualties caught in a civil war that's being supported by Russia.
Tom, am I wrong in thinking, I just believe I've read this somewhere more than once, that the Ukrainian army itself is doing better?
Somewhat better, but they're not going to be able to, they don't have the strength to push the Russian-backed militants and what some people call little green men in uniforms without any identification that clearly seem to be Russian special forces. The Ukrainians seem to have their military act together a little bit better, but they don't have the strength to push the insurgents out of Ukraine unless the Russians just decide to cut the rebels off, which of course they're not going to do. So better, but that doesn't mean the Russian-backed separatists around Donetsk and Luhansk are going to be out of business soon. I think quite the contrary.
I said I was confused about what was going on in Turkey. I'm also confused by Russian leader Vladimir Putin. Why presidents now, first George W. Bush, who thought he could see inside Putin and see his soul, and thought he could really deal with him. And at the beginning, one Secretary of State Clinton and also President Obama thought they could deal with him. And they seemed, and both of them, both presidents anyway, have learned the hard way, Barbara.
Yeah. Well, look, Putin has his view of Greater Russia. He thinks the collapse of the Soviet Union was the biggest tragedy, to both mankind in the last quarter century, and he's determined to keep as large a sphere of influence for Russia as possible, and that includes in areas where there are a lot of ethnic Russians, and eastern Ukraine is one of them. The fact is that Ukraine is divided between people who look west and people who look east, and so there's fertile ground there for Russia.
I've been reading a fascinating new book by Marvin Kalb, a former colleague of ours, both at CBS News and NBC News, who's written a new book on Russia, Putin, and Ukraine, and he's arguing that it's more than just the fact that Putin's a megalomaniac and a paranoid and terrified of NATO. He's terrified of any more encroachment on Russian borders. And in addition to that, it goes much deeper. As Barbara says, Greater Russia. Ukraine, in Putin's view, is the heart and soul of Russia and has been for over 1,000 years. It's still into what I would call the kind of the institutional, the sense of grievance in the Russian DNA, exemplified and expanded by Putin. None of this is surprising.
Is there something in American policy that could change to affect Putin favorably?
Well, I think the good news is that the U.S. and Russia are cooperating on issues like Iran, and there is more talk that Russia will try to exercise some positive influence on the Syrian conflict as well. I think John Kerry is eager to begin to have discussions about how to try to calm down that crisis, and he's talking to the Russian foreign minister, he's talking to others. I should point out that Vladimir Putin is coming to the UN General Assembly
in September.
So there is a possibility that he and Obama could sit down and have a chat about Iran and Syria. Which, in the Middle East, there might be more of a convergence.
Yes, Tom?
The Russians are going to do whatever they perceive to be their self-interest. And I think part of it is as long as Putin is persuaded that what he would see as a threat from Ukraine is been negated, I think he's willing to try to look like a statesman, or relatively speaking, a statesman in other other areas. So it is possible that he will behave a little better. Let's don't forget, I think the sanctions have really hurt Putin, and the drop in oil prices has really messed up the economy. So he's looking for areas where he can be less of a bad boy.
I forgot to ask Barbara about something that Samantha Power, the UN ambassador of the UN, said, and I quoted from it, but I want to ask you about it. She said basically that with the way the Russia's acting, the Security Council is dysfunctional. That dysfunctional is my word, but that's what did. I mean, she said the question is whether it can or will enforce the UN Charter.
I find that kind of ironic because they just unanimously passed the Iran deal, so it's certainly not dysfunctional all the time. It just depends on the issue and how directly it's perceived to affect Russian national interests.
But that wasn't necessary for the Iranians.
It was necessary. It was absolutely necessary. That's what gives it the force of international law. That's what puts Congress in a pickle. So it absolutely was necessary.
Well, I guess I think I would agree with Barbara on that. It's harder for opponents of the deal to say this is just Obama desperate for a deal. He's got the rest of the world, for the most part, signed on to this thing for good or ill, and so having the Security Council sign on was an important development here.
Well, that's all the time we have. Joining us today were Tom DeFrank, contributing editor at National Journal, and Barbara Slavin, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and Washington correspondent for Monitor.com. The program was produced by Anya Zalewski. Our engineer was Justin Thwaites. I'm Fred Barnes of the Weekly Standard. Thanks for listening. Liverpool publicated on the nuclear activities. Should be silent. The remainder of the transfer window, Thomas and Zambia. He's the striker that they need. I'm not sure if that will be happening. This is interesting. It's got his Barcelona. No, I'm not going to give you any chance because you'll never get it. Charlie Austin. I was going to say Charlie Austin. And Yannick Bolasie from Crystal Palace. And Norda in Uganda. From Manchester City. That could be a big deal. That's what no one will call the transfer. What's your thoughts on so far as far as you're concerned, Papa?
You know, I think that's worrying. You know, a lot of people are about to change Norda, but again, he's no normal free, you know. He's not the most spectacular player, but you know what you're going to get with him.
Yeah.
And he's still goes on at Manchester City, even though he was trying to part, he was always influential, he was coming on with this under $6 time. And I just think that there's another free. I like the free ball thing. The free ball with some of the things has been quite interesting. The good acquisition has been free. I think Regina do well at Man City as well. I mean, he always looks a bit more hungry. I saw him say that he looks hungry, he looks like he wants it. We know that from the way he grew from he's got that bit between his teeth, and I think the whole situation going about his transfer, he's probably going to go there and see that more than you to motivate himself to do that at Manchester City.
Yeah, interesting how he does get on. He was a little bit more than three, wasn't he? Should he feel then so far away from maybe the top half?
You know, it's so important this year, isn't it? Because the billions of dollars, the multi-billion-dollar TV deal is going to be felt from this season. So clubs like Newcastle United, the same like Ashley, has always been loath to spend money. They've spent a lot, $55 million. And what do you think their most expensive signing? Attacking midfielder from the Netherlands, Jorginho Wijnaldum, $23 million. I think he could be the shortest.
We'll keep an eye, of course, on the bills.
Here on the BBC World
Service, we've got Andre Ayew on the way.
Before we get into it once again. Burundi's president, Pierre Nkurunziza, has been killed in an attack on his car in the capital Bujumbura. Simi Ramana was a former army chief of staff and intelligence. Burundi has been shut down
unrest since April when Mr. Nkurunziza announced he took a path by Africa. BBC's Vito Magendo is in Bujumbura.
The teacup transporting General Advocate Simulana from the Burundi Chief of Intelligence was attacked by unknown people, and apparently the huge
Secretary of State has pledged America's support to Egypt when countries are moving back towards some base in their relationship. Their ties have been strained since the end of Egypt's first democratically elected president on abortion. Israeli hospital sources say a 16-year-old girl who was stabbed at a Jerusalem Gay Pride March has died of her injuries. The girl was one of 6 who was stabbed on Thursday. The suspected attacker is a member of an ultra-religious Jewish group. A court in India has ruled that a family tribunal was wrong to grant a divorce to a man on the grounds that his wife's partying constituted mental cruelty. He was given a divorce 4 years ago after complaining that his spouse often went to late-night parties and had outbursts on small issues. And the British singer and TV personality Cilla Black has died in Spain. She's 72. A contemporary of the Beatles, Cilla Black went on to amass a string of hits, including albums. Successful on those stories in the newsroom at 8 hours GMT. Thank you very much
indeed. Arsenal have beaten Chelsea 1-0 the Community Shield at Wembley. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain scored the only goal of the game. Manchester United 24 hours after a fee of $68 million with the deal. The South Korean golfer Indy Park has won the women's City Open. In straight sets the Italian Fabio Fognini. Craig Evans' maiden century guided Zimbabwe to a surprise 7-wicket victory over New Zealand. Continues to dominate the second test between Bangladesh and South Africa. The third day in a row has been watched there at the host of 246 for 8. China's Olympic champion Sun Yang has successfully defended his 400-metre sprint start at the Swimming World Championship. And the IOC is concerned the World Tour Oxford Olympics in Rio de Janeiro. Now it's time to focus on the African talent we can look forward to watching this season in the English Premier League. Over the next 25 minutes or so, we'll introduce you to the new arrivals. We'll find out how one of English football's established African stars has turned himself into a player who's now worth $62 million. We've had a reporter substituting as well. Ron Burdick is replacing Steve Crossman. Still with us, though, Papa Ackerman, who's represents a number of African players, including Juventus star Jose Asamoah. When we're going to start, by talking about in Africa.
The Ayew brothers, 90 Ghana caps between them. They're going to be reunited in the English Premier League this week, right? Andre's made the move from Marseille to Swansea, free transfer, got to the end of his contract at Marseille. Jordan is signed for Aston Villa for $13 million. Lorient, their father, as you know, Lee, is the legend of African football, Freddie Palais, former African footballer of the year. Let's begin by focusing on Andre. He's the older of the brothers, the more experienced one as well. 10 years at Marseille, man and boy. The club and the player couldn't come to an agreement about a new deal, so he's moved on now. There was interest from across Europe, clubs in England, Italy and Germany. In the end, he chose Oregon City in the States last season. I spoke to him in Marseille just before he France. He admitted that adapting to a new life outside France will be a big challenge.
Well, I'm going to something different, here. I'm at home here, and I know everybody. Whether it's in town or whether it's